Welcome to the deep dive. So, today we're diving into something I think, well, pretty much everyone experiences at some point, just feeling completely worn out.
Uh-huh.
And you, our listener, you've shared some really interesting sources. We've got a YouTube transcript of a prayer and some articles, all
Mhm.
focused on prayer and navigating that deep sense of weariness.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's a rich mix. They look at how prayer isn't just, saying words, but can be a genuine way to find some rest, some comfort when things feel heavy.
Whether that's physical, mental, or even spiritual heaviness.
Exactly. So our mission here is to kind of unpack that. What are the core ideas in these sources about how prayer addresses these different kinds of weariness? What are the pathways to solace being suggested?
Yeah, going beyond just reciting the words. And it really hits home, doesn't it? I mean, have you ever felt that kind of physical drain where, like, picking up a pen feels like a huge effort?
Oh, absolutely. Or just mentally spinning your wheels.
Totally. Or that deeper sadness, that weight you can't quite name. These sources really get into those feelings.
They do. They offer a framework, maybe, for finding a bit of peace within all that.
Okay, so let's get into this. The prayer and the articles, they start by acknowledging that weariness isn't just one thing, it's varied.
Yeah, that's a really key starting point, I think. They break it down, which helps, see how this fatigue can show up in different ways in our lives.
Yeah.
Makes it less overwhelming, maybe.
Right. So, first up, there's the obvious one, physical exhaustion.
Uh-huh.
The sources mention things like, relentless hard work just grinding you down, or maybe a long illness that just saps your energy.
Or that endless task of caring for others, which can be incredibly draining physically.
Definitely. And the prayer speaks right into that, doesn't it? Uses some really specific language.
It does. It asks for a physical touch, which is interesting, and for warmth, describing it as like the sun on a winter's day.
That's such a comforting image. So tangible, you can almost feel it.
Yeah, and it asks for renewed strength, and tired muscles, vitality back in weary limbs.
And that deep sleep, that sort of restorative, childlike sleep. We all know what that feels like when we finally get it after being exhausted.
Absolutely. Plus, there's this idea of feeling a presence, almost like a mother's gentle touch,
Hmm.
that sense of not being alone in the physical struggle.
Which is huge when you feel isolated by illness or exhaustion. And it explicitly mentions the body finding peace, not just the mind, but the body itself.
And I think that underlines how important it is to see the physical reality of weariness. It's not just in our heads, our bodies feel it, and they need care. Both, well, practical care and maybe this deeper kind the prayer points to.
Okay, so then there's the mental weariness, and boy, I think everyone can relate to this one.
Oh, yeah. The overthinking.
The constant loop, worrying about the future, going over the past with regret, feeling totally swamped by just everything.
Exactly. And the prayer tackles this head on. It invokes the God of clarity.
I like that phrase, God of clarity.
Me too.
Oh,
It's asking for stillness, isn't it?
yeah.
To calm the storms of anxiety and troubled minds.
It's suggesting that mental rest isn't necessarily about stopping all thought, which feels impossible sometimes.
Right. Impossible. But maybe finding a different relationship to the thoughts. A calm space within the mental chatter.
Yeah, it almost echoes that line, be still and know that I am God, replacing the chaos with maybe assurance,
Uh-huh. And this idea of releasing what you can't hold on to anyway, letting go of what you can't control.
which is so hard. But the prayer asks for that calm, that clarity, and the courage just to lay down those burdens you don't actually need to carry mentally.
It really speaks to that need we have for control, doesn't it? So much mental strain comes from feeling we have to manage everything.
And this offers another way, letting go, trusting in, well, a higher care, finding peace there.
Precisely.
Okay, and then the third kind, spiritual weariness, feeling heavy in spirit. This
Yeah.
one can feel really deep, maybe harder to talk about.
Definitely. The sources mention grief, loss, the sting of betrayal, loneliness.
Yeah, that woundedness, that pain that's almost beyond words.
And here, the prayer addresses the compassionate Father. It really acknowledges that deep, sometimes hidden pain.
It talks about breathing new life into weary souls, reminding people that God is near, especially when they feel brokenhearted. That's powerful.
And that image,
Hmm.
collecting every tear, it suggests such profound empathy, such deep care.
It really does. Like nothing is missed, no pain is too small. Even in really dark times, the prayer offers like a little flicker of hope.
A glimmer of purpose, maybe, and the possibility of healing, even when things feel utterly bleak.
It shows how much our spiritual state affects everything else. If your spirit feels heavy, it just weighs down your whole life.
Exactly. And the prayer suggests a way toward maybe lightening that spiritual load.
And there's one more aspect the prayer touches on which feels so honest.
What's that?
The struggle to even pray when you're that exhausted, when you're just too tired for words.
Ah, yes. That's such a compassionate point. It acknowledges our limits. It talks about a wordless embrace.
You don't even have to form the sentences.
Right. And the idea that the Spirit intercedes speaks for us, even when we can't. It's this idea that you're still held, still heard, even in silence or numbness.
That's incredibly comforting. Like, even when you can't reach out, you're still connected.
Exactly.
Okay, so those are the different types of weariness. If we zoom out a bit, what are the big overarching themes about finding rest in God that come through in these sources?
Well, several big ideas stand out. The most central, perhaps, is just that simple invitation. Rest in God.
It sounds simple, but it's quite active, isn't it? A choice to seek grounding there.
Yes, an intentional turning towards something beyond the immediate stress or exhaustion.
And tied into that is the reminder, and this feels huge, that we're not made to bear all alone.
That really counters the isolation that often comes with suffering or burnout. It says you're part of something bigger. You don't have to carry it all yourself.
Which leads naturally to this idea of surrender.
Yes, letting go,
Uh-huh.
releasing our grip on our plans, our fears, that constant need to be in control.
And trusting, placing that trust in a higher care, as you said before, it's acknowledging our limits.
And finding freedom in that, potentially.
Yeah.
Because trying to control everything is exhausting.
So true. The sources also mention pacing, living with grace, honoring our limits.
Which is so countercultural, isn't it? We're pushed to do more, be more. This suggests wisdom in knowing when to stop, when to rest, respecting our boundaries.
Absolutely. And then there's that slightly paradoxical idea about trusting in weakness.
Right, that God's strength is somehow revealed or accessed through our vulnerability, not in spite of it.
So admitting we're struggling isn't failure, it's maybe an opening.
That seems to be the suggestion. The
Yeah.
opening to a different kind of strength, perhaps divine support.
And throughout it all, there's this desire, this prayer for the weary person to actually feel God's nearness right here, right now.
Yeah, not abstract theology, but a felt sense of presence, tangible comfort.
And the language used for that comfort is so gentle, like cool water, a quiet sigh of relief.
A nudge to just lie down and let go. It's all very inviting, very permission-giving, not demanding.
It feels like these themes are all about shifting perspective, really, moving from striving to trusting.
I think that's a great way to put it, shifting from effort and struggle towards openness and reliance.
Now, interestingly, the prayer, and maybe the articles too, they don't just keep it internal, do they? It seems to extend outwards into community and action.
That's a really vital part. It talks about experiencing God's love through other people,
How so?
like hearing it in a friend's voice or seeing it in a stranger's unexpected kindness. It emphasizes we're connected. We're not meant to do this alone.
So for you listening, if you feel isolated in your weariness, this points towards connection as part of the solution, both receiving it.
And giving it. The prayer actually calls on people to be instruments of God's peace, to be God's hands and feet for others who are tired.
It's a call to participate,
Mm.
even in small ways.
Definitely. And the examples are so down to earth. Offer a gentle word. Just sit with someone in silence. Bring someone a cup of cold water. Simple acts of kindness, human connection, they can make a huge difference when someone's at the end of their rope.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then there's that lovely idea of honoring tiredness itself.
Honoring it. How?
Seeing it in ourselves and others, not as a failure, but as a sacred reminder
A reminder of what?
of our shared humanity, maybe, our limits, our need for each other and for something beyond ourselves. It reframes exhaustion as a point of connection, not shame.
That encourages empathy, doesn't it? Understanding that feeling worn out is just part of being human.
Exactly. We all experience it.
Okay, there's one crucial clarification, though, that the sources seem keen to make. This comfort, this rest. It's not presented as, like, magic, right?
No, absolutely not. That's a very important distinction. It's not portrayed as flicking a switch and all hardship disappears.
So what is it presented as?
It's presented as an outcome of, well, spiritual life, of engaging in prayer, cultivating trust, leaning on community faith. It's something that emerges through those practices.
Not a guarantee that life will suddenly be easy.
Definitely not. It's not about eliminating hardship or getting an instant cure. It's more about finding inner strength, solace and peace within the challenges.
Right. Finding a way to navigate the hard stuff rather than escaping it entirely, that's a key difference.
The very significant difference. It's about
Really?
building resilience and an inner peace that can actually coexist with life's difficulties.
Okay, so wrapping this up, it feels like these sources you shared, they offer a really multifaceted view of finding rest when weary,
I think so too. It's comprehensive.
addressing the physical side, the mental churn, the spiritual weight, all through prayer, trust, and importantly, community connection.
Precisely. It acknowledges the complexity of being human and feeling worn out. And it offers various potential pathways toward finding some renewal, some solace, right in the middle of it all.
So, a final thought maybe for you listening, thinking about all these different facets, the physical, mental, spiritual exhaustion, and the ways we might find rest. What's one small step you could take today?
Maybe a tiny act of surrender, or reaching out for a connection. Something that might bring just a moment of rest to your heart, your mind.
Or looking outward, how could you maybe be that instrument of peace for someone else around you who seems weary today?
Yeah, definitely good questions to ponder. These sources offer comfort, for sure, but also maybe a wider lens on living with our limits, trusting more, and connecting deeper.
Food for thought, for sure. Thanks for digging into this with me.
My pleasure. It's important stuff.